Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm Leanne Huang, the Fellowships Manager, and Deborah Darrow and Deborah is the Fellowships Chair. We are going to talk through our new Research to Action Grant Pilot Program today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We do have you all muted, but at any point during the webinar, please feel free to type questions into the questions box, and we will, if we don't cover those during the presentation, then we will certainly answer those at the end. I can read them out, and Deb and I can answer those. So let's get started. The agenda for today, I'm just going to tell you what we're going to talk about, and then we will get started. We're going to talk about the purpose of these grants and sort of why we decided to pursue these. Talk about the award parameters and eligibility, what you need to do in order to qualify for consideration. We'll go through what meetings are required of the teams, required deliverables, and the submission details, like how you submit a proposal and what needs to be included. Deb, why don't I turn it over to you?
Great. Thanks, Leanne. I'm going to just run through some of the logistics and background on our thinking about this. You all, I'm sure, have read the announcement, so there should be nothing that we're going to say here that'll be new or startling to you, but we're hoping we'll be able to sharpen your thinking about this process. We elected to go down this road primarily because I just have great faith in the fellows. I think you're all great thinkers. I think you have a keen eye on the kinds of changes that need to happen, both from a research perspective as well as how you do your work and then how you apply it to solve real-world problems on really thorny problems that plague practitioners and policymakers. We wanted to have a mechanism where we could put in place some of the very things we've talked with you all about since you joined the fellowship, and that's really a function of how to apply research to practice. So we wanted to invest in you all in helping you further down this pathway, of which many of you are already pursuing. We think by offering these grants, we're really going to have the opportunity to leverage what you do as individuals, and more importantly, really begin to grow and deepen the fellowship's collective impact. So what are some of the parameters? It's pretty simple, not complex. We're going to award up to 3 grants. The maximum award amount would be $80,000. There will be no inherent benefit to coming in under $80,000. That's what the budget could afford. As we envision this work, we think there's some really interesting projects that can indeed be done at this level of effort. Some of you may be really super efficient and can do things for a bargain price. Don't feel you have to have a bargain price. If you want to do a bargain price, that's fine. But again, we're really looking to fund 3 grants at or around $80,000. The grant period is going to be 12 months. If you're, again, super efficient, you can get done in less than 12 months, that's fine also. But we'd like to have the work completed no later than March 31st of 2020. There's just a glaring typo in here. I was looking at that thinking, wow, that would be fast. One of the reasons we want to do this is that, it's our belief that this grant program is extraordinarily attractive to the fellows, and we know that. To the Doris Duke folks. And we really want some time within our grant period to be able to raise, put together some summary statements about how these grants have been used and what they've meant for the fellowship and the field in general going forward. So we want these to be 12-month grants so we can have some time before our grant would end at the end of 2020 to really bring your learning lessons together in a collective way that we could then share with the foundation. The grants must apply research strategies to address policy and practice. So this is not money to do basic research. This is not money to answer something that you've just wondered in the broader scheme of things. This question has to be rooted in a real world problem that some policymaker or practitioner is facing right now. We recognize that it's a small amount of money. We encourage you to pick a specific challenge and then outline what you can do to move towards a solution to that challenge. We have no illusions that all of the grants are going to be able to find a problem, come up with the magic solution, and then have the answer at the end. But what we're hoping you're going to be able to use this money is not necessarily to solve a problem, although if you do that, that would be great. But it's more likely that you're going to increase understanding of a problem, understand clarity about where the agency or policy people may want to take their next step. So keep that in mind as you're framing your research question. So let's talk a little about eligibility criteria. Those are the parameters. That's what we want you to do in terms of what you need to have at the table in a structural way to be successful. You need to have at least 2 fellows from different disciplines. So yourself and one of your other colleagues, they can come from any cohort. That's not a condition for funding, but we do want to have 2 disciplinary perspectives. We want you to have the active participation of a non-research applicant. In other words, if you're working with an agency manager, a direct service organization, and you're working with their team, you're working with a legislator, they are involved in crafting what you're doing and how you're going to use it. The fellows involved in this can have their PhD, or they may still be working on it. That again is not there's no benefit being one or the other. We treat each of them equally. The more important thing is you're from 2 disciplines, you're working with a partner, a practice or policy partner that you have fully engaged. We want you to address a specific issue with a clear policy or practice initiative. We want to make sure that you can articulate, here's the issue on the table, this is how we can use research to resolve it, and this is what it's going to mean. Not resolve it, but at least provide greater insights, and this is what's going to mean to the practice or policy group we're working with. You can build your research around existing data. Many agencies already have a lot of data. There are administrative data resources that I know a number of you are already working with, or you can feel free to collect data. It just has to be collected and analyzed within the 12-month period. So when I think of new data, I don't think of a 3-year longitudinal research project. I think more of you're going to do focus groups. You're going to be doing small surveys. You're going to be maybe doing observations of how services are being provided or how discussions are being maintained, documentation of who's at the table, who's worked on this issue in the past. You may be collecting some historical data on the problem. But it is either existing or it can be new, but it has to be able to be achievable and analyzed within our 12-month period. You're going to need to propose products that will really speak to at least 2 audiences. One is an academic audience, the peers that you work with in both the Fellows Program and your own, many of you in academic institutions or research centers. And I'll talk a little bit more about the detail of these projects. But for now, think of 2 buckets. One for an academic audience, the other for people working in the field. It could be legislators, it could be agency managers, it could be the general public. Actually, if you think that that's one of the things you want to reach out and clarify for the public what a certain situation is and how they might respond to the task at hand, whatever it is, but there'll be at least 2 product pathways you're going to have to propose and develop. I'm going to come back to what those products might look like, but I'm going to have Leanne talk a little bit about how this will expand the network.
Thank you, Deb. Before we move forward, we had one question that I want to ask related to the eligibility. So one question we have is, what if the non-research stakeholder, so the partner in this, is both an executive director of an organization and an academic person? I mean, they also hold an academic appointment. Is that fine?
That would be fine.
Yep.
We would be playing to their role as an institution manager, but that would not be a problem.
Right. Okay. Thank you. All right. So one thing we wanted to talk about is how we hope that this expands the network. So when you're considering your project team, We definitely are hopeful that you will, and we'll give preference to teams that extend the network of emerging scholars. So really the two ways to do that, one will be if you're employed in an academic institution, that you include one or more graduate students from your universities on your project team. And the second one, if you're not in an academic environment, if you're at a policy research center or a nonprofit organization or an agency, that you would include junior level researchers on the project team. For example, at a place like Chapin Hall, you could include a researcher, an associate researcher, an analyst, a policy analyst, or somebody like that that's earlier in their career. We highly encourage you to engage professionals from populations that are underrepresented in the research. And that is a variety of different kinds of populations, but we really want you to be thoughtful about that and how you can include folks that might not have these type of opportunities as frequently as others might. Okay, Deb, we're going to talk. You're going to talk about the deliverables.
Let me talk a little bit about following up on the comments I made earlier. At least one of the deliverables out of this has to be targeted to an academic audience. A journal article that's ready for submission. We have no illusions that people can have a journal article in press in any short period of time. But what we're looking for is a near complete draft with a real clear indication about what publications you're going to be submitting it to. Or it could be a conference poster or presentation, something you've done to a professional organization at an APSAC meeting or at APA or something of that nature, where you're really describing your research and its implications to primarily your peers in an academic setting. The second deliverable, because keep in mind, we really want to be educating other academics about the importance of doing applied research and using research to practice. So that's the message we want you to take back to those of you that are working in academic institutions, but even those who are not, to be reaching out to the members of their discipline that work in academic settings. Remember, you're all viruses trying to change the way in which we approach doctoral education in this country. Secondly, you need a product that you can take to the field or targeted to a provider audience, if you will. Here we talk about policy briefs, training materials, agency guidelines. It could be a presentation you do to the local oversight committee at a legislative hearing, for example, that would be wanting to know what you did and how you did it. That the important thing here is that there's also a way in which you're sharing your findings with the people on the ground that are going to be responsible for implementing the kinds of changes you're talking about. It could be people that are within the organization you're working with that need to hear this message, but also it could be their peers from professional societies or professional meetings they have, where you're taking the lessons you learned from this effort to other agencies that run child welfare centers or do healthcare delivery systems and the like. In addition to that, there'll be a final report that'll be due 30 days after the end of the project period, and this is what you all know what a final report looks like. It's what did you do, how did you do it, what did you learn, what are the challenges you saw. We will give you a template of all the things that need to be included in this final report, but we don't imagine this is an onerous document with hundreds of pages. It's probably a relatively brief product that's going to hit some key learning areas in which you've developed as a result of your research. Let me talk a little bit about project meetings and expectations. We really want this to be not just something you do within the project that you're funded to do it with your own partners in your own setting, but also that these three grantee teams will learn from each other. And we want to create an environment where that's possible. We're going to bring you together, and we really are requiring that at least the fellows that are involved in this project, as well as at least one member from the institution they're partnering with, join us at the mid-year meetings. You know, the one in 2019 will be in Phoenix, Arizona. 2020 is yet to be decided. Although, given the interest we're seeing in Phoenix, Arizona, we may never be able to go any place that's got snow on the ground in the mid-year meeting ever again. seems to be quite popular for stunning people. We have in our budget to pay the travel costs related to at least up to 3 people. We're assuming 2 fellows and the partner. Now, if you want to bring anyone else to these meetings, you are welcome to do that, but that would have to be covered out of the $80,000 grant that we'd be giving you. In addition to the face-to-face meetings, we're going to be having regular calls. We'll probably do those a little more frequently at the beginning of the project period, a little less towards the end. But we also want to encourage you, in addition to the calls we will schedule, and again, we would like at least the 2 fellows and at least 1 person from the agency to be on these calls. We do understand that schedules are such that it can be difficult, but we really want every grantee represented on the calls to be sure. In addition to these regular calls, we really are going to encourage you to write each other, to write us. We shouldn't need a regular scheduled call to raise a question if it's really of interest to the group. We want to encourage you to raise your questions and your issues as they surface with everyone else on this team, and we'll make sure that you have full access to how to contact these individuals. In addition to these regular scheduled meetings and calls, there may also be other opportunities that will surface for the group to come together. But within our travel budget framework for this, remember, we will include travel for at least 3 people per grant to the 2 meetings we list here in our budget. Any other travel will rest on your budget.
Okay. I am going to talk, this is Leanne, I'm going to talk about proposal submission information. The all-important deadline is Friday, December 14th by 11:59 p.m. So by the end of the day on Friday, December 14th, we should have all of your materials. The submission process is simple. You should send us the documents as PDFs and email it to ddfellowships@chapinhall.org. I know that it may seem weird to submit it to that instead of to me and my email address, but this is a way that we can all keep track of what has been submitted rather than just me. We will confirm that we've received your materials within 24 hours of receiving it. One thing we did want to note, this is different than the fellowship application process that you all went through, but if reviewers that are reviewing the proposals have questions for proposal teams, those will be sent out to you sometime in January. I don't know the exact dates yet. It'll depend partially on how many proposals we receive. But you will then have a 1-week window to answer those questions. We will not be doing like phone interviews like we did with the fellowship, so these will be written questions and answers. So let me talk about the actual proposals. The 11:59 p.m. deadline is Central Time at Chapin Hall. All right, so the proposal should include a brief narrative of the project. So the maximum is 10 pages. So there's a document that I sent out to everybody, all the fellows, and that is on our website that has proposal requirements. It gives you all this information in even more detail. So those 10 pages, it has like the fonts and the margins and all that, those details. Any references you include do not count toward the page limit. We ask that all these things in this box with these check marks, those need to be included in the narrative. Your research aims and implications, I am not going to define these carefully right now. They're standard. We want you to, yes, it's all in the written material we sent you. It's like the proposal requirements, I think is the name of the document. So your research aims and the implications of the work, your data and the methodology that you plan to use, primarily your analysis strategies, your implementation strategies, like how you're actually going to get the work done. We do want you to talk about the IRB plan and your expected timeline. This is something that is very important to make sure that you have been thoughtful about the ability to get your project approved by the IRB. So that is something we encourage you not to sort of skip over that. I would definitely include, address those questions. Description of each of the deliverables that Deb has already talked about. Strategies for disseminating your findings and promoting their utilization. That goes with the deliverables, obviously, but to talk a little more about how you actually plan to get those out. And your timeline narrative, so sort of explaining the different phases of your project, and a budget narrative. We are going to talk in more detail about the budget template and sort of what's allowable toward the end of the webinar. But those are the main sections. You need to make sure you address all of those. Again, additional descriptions of each of those are in that document that we sent out. Your proposal also needs to include some supporting materials. Supporting is probably not the right word. It's also required materials. The detailed timeline. When we do those, those are sort of graphic, an Excel spreadsheet with, this task and when you do that in each month or whatever. I'm imagining an Excel spreadsheet with triangles and circles and different colors or whatever, but detailed enough for us to understand what your project is really about. The budget template, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. We need CVs for fellows, key partners, and junior scholars, and then letters of support. What is particularly important in these letters of support are letters that address data usage. So if you are planning to utilize existing data, we definitely would look for a letter from that agency or that organization talking about data access and the timeline for that and what their expectation is. So those are the requirements of the proposal. I think that Deb is going to talk about the budget template and allowable expenses, and then we can go on to questions.
Great, thanks, Leanne. We will post on the web sort of a budget template that will be pretty straightforward. It'll help you with the calculations of things. For most, we're not really restrictive in the sense of telling you how many hours people can work or anything like that. It's the budget. What the budget template will let you do is when you put in the name and responsibility for any individual person, and you put in the hours that they work, and you put in what their hourly rate is, the template will then calculate what that amount would be. It will allow you to add in whatever fringe benefit you have on your salaries, and again, it will then automatically calculate that on how you've set the salaries up. Our indirect rate is capped at 10%, and that's 10% of all your expenses. In other words, you put everything in your budget, whether it's your salary and then your indirect costs, and then you put 10% on top of that for indirect charges. I know for many of you in academic institutions that's woefully less than what your indirect rate is. We appreciate that, but we are limited in that Doris Duke only gives us 10% on our grants, and so we can only pass that 10% on to you. Again, the proposals under $80,000 will be accepted, but as you look at your budget, think not only of the staff that you need for this, which will probably be a good part of your budget. Other things will be any kinds of consulting or other relationships you have with other organizations. In other words, we really want one entity to be the fiscal agent for this budget. So if it's your fellow A at institution A, that institution may be the home for this grant, then fellow B can become a consultant, for lack of a better term, on this budget. Our accounting people have said if you think of putting people in as consultants rather than subcontractors, it actually is an easier process for us. If you have specific questions about that, please let us know, and we can talk with our grants people about that. So you may want to have money to the partner you're using. They may require some resources. Again, that would be in another role of consultant. You may want to think about, as you're doing your products, do you want someone to help with help with the design of the product? Do you want someone to help with the printing and distribution of the product? In that case, you should think about those expenses and build them into your budget. In addition to the budget template, we'll be including a list of possible direct costs that you might want to think about. You don't have to include everything we're putting on this list, but it'll be a way to trigger for you to reflect on whether you do need these kinds of resources or not. I've talked about the one financial agent, which I think is really going to be the most important. That'll be a decision you all have to make about who you want to have be the fiscal agent for the money. We're agnostic on how that is set up. We just know we just want one fiscal agent. And that template should be up shortly. We're just working out a few of the kinks in the calculations.
And then before we address any questions, so please type any questions into the box if you have any additional ones. I just want to reiterate one thing that Deb said before, and I'm not sure it was very clear on the slide. For the travel costs, so basically for 3 people from each team, 2 fellows and 1 partner, we will pay your travel costs. For those 2 meetings, the mid-year meeting in 2019 and in 2020. You are welcome to bring additional people, but you need to include those people in your travel budget.
And your other things in your travel budget may be local travel to just go and see the I mean, if that has to be part of your budget, you can put that in your budget too.
Right.
It's those kinds of things. And thinking about is, I'm going to do this work, what do I really need in order to make sure I do the work as completely and as timely as possible.
So one other question that I want to address is this is just a logistics thing. Please try to send your questions to that DD Fellowship email address if you can, because we're going to keep track of those and then post them to the frequently asked questions document on our website. So if you can try to remember to do that, I'm still going to include them if you send them to me directly, but it helps me because Mickey can get into that address book as well, or to that email inbox as well, and then we can keep track of those questions. Okay, Mickey, did we have any other questions come up? I don't think so. So yeah, the deadline is 11:59 p.m. Central Time on December 14th. Okay, I think those are all the questions that we have. Oh, is there a preference for focusing on a local challenge versus a broader challenge? I can answer my thought, or Deb, do you want to go?
Yeah, my thought would be it's what's most salient for the organization you're working with. I mean, one thing I would, if I was thinking about logistically, I'd start with a local challenge, and then as you write up your final report or you're talking about your implications, you should keep an eye towards, well, what does this mean for other like institutions? Am I the only institution? Is this the only situation like this in the United States of America, perhaps the world, that is facing this challenge? I suspect you're going to find that there's probably very few of those. So that you should be thinking about, how can I learn from this local example and then extrapolate it and begin to open up opportunities for other organizations in similar situations to address the challenge the way it's playing out in their organization.
One question that we have is, and I hope we address this, but the fellows can be from any cohort. So even if you're still a student, you're cohort 8, cohort 7, you're not at all done, that is totally fine. And we do want fellows to provide the leadership for these projects. That's the part of the goal for these, is that it provides you an opportunity to provide leadership on a project of your own. Oh, this is a good question, actually. So can you submit multiple applications? We have had this question before, and it actually is on is the FAQ online already? It is. So by the way, it is online. There's a a tab on the website about this. So the answer to that is yes. You can submit multiple applications. The assumption would be that, or the hope would be that they wouldn't be exactly the same with just a different set of people.
Can I ask a clarifying question? By multiple applications, do you mean can a fellow be a partner on 2 different studies, or can my team, as I've constructed it, float 2 ideas by you? Which way do you think of multiple? We have to maybe unmute. Catherine, can you just?
Yeah, she said, can a fellow be on 2 different teams?
Yes, the fellow can be on 2 different teams, providing the fellow is playing a somewhat different role on those 2 different teams. In other words, this is an example I don't think anybody would use, but, oh, I'm a data cruncher, and I can be a data cruncher for this proposal, or I can be a data cruncher for that proposal. That's probably less interesting to us than I'm here because I have an expertise with a certain body of research for this proposal, and that's what I'm contributing. And then on this other proposal, I'm contributing an understanding of a specific methodology. So those would be using the fellow in 2 different ways.
We also have a question about whether each fellow is expected to make an equal contribution, 50-50, or can one fellow be doing, more of the primary and the other one is more supportive, like 80-20 or 70-30, and that is absolutely fine. We would hope that the fellows each did play a role. We are hopeful that you will not submit something where someone is just sort of in name only. We all think it's probably rare for it ever to be strictly 50-50 on any project, even if it's set up that way. So yes, you can have different levels of responsibilities in the project. Okay, those are all of our questions that we have right now. We really appreciate your interest in this. Like we said, we will post the budget template hopefully tomorrow. What? I'm thinking you have 3 fellows? I do, yeah, I think so. Okay.
We're just talking about ourselves. We're focusing on 2 fellows, at least 2 fellows, but you could have 3 if there were more minor roles to play. But keeping in mind, you'd have to decide among yourself who's coming to the mid-year meeting on our dime versus who might be coming on your own grant dime.
Right. With the caveat that, for our mid-year meetings, we cover hotel costs for fellows anyway. So if you have 3 fellows, all 3 fellows' hotels would be covered, but only 2 people's airfare and ground transportation and food and all of that would be covered by Chapin Hall under our budget. So that's just something you all would have to decide. But yes, you definitely can have more than 2. Okay. I have already gotten several questions over email about this. I've put them into the FAQ. We have a couple that need to already be updated, but I would be checking that on a pretty regular basis because we will continue to answer questions as we receive those. Yeah, and the budget should be up hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow, if not a little sooner. So ask any questions you have. And we look forward to reading your proposals. Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks.